Hey everyone, welcome back. And today I'm joined by two very special guests. We're joined by Ian Cummings from Pro Football Network and the Mock Draft Guy, two guys that have been on this channel before, but with Senior Bowl going on this past week, we wanted to hop on here and talk about our biggest risers and fallers from the week. So we'll start with you, Peter. How are you doing today? How's your week been? And just, yeah.
I'm good, man. I'm excited to get this going. Mr. Ian, Mr. Josiah, I'm ready to go, dude.
Ian, how's it been going? I know it's been a little bit. Do you want to fill the listeners in on kind of what you've been up to over the last few weeks?
Yeah, so PFN, the college football season is over, so it's been scouting report season for me. So getting a little bit farther down the board, in the Senior Bowl, a lot of great talent on tap for that event, right? So we're really diving deep into that. Obviously, got a great look at those guys this past week. So that's basically been it, right? Scouting reports, just kind of getting a little bit further, and as we get further and further into the offseason, we'll have a clearer picture of how the draft board shakes out. But I'm excited to be back with you. It's been a while, but I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got 10 honorable mentions. We've got 5 guys that I think their stock took a bit of a hit, and then we've got about 15 winners. So you guys can look at it as 25 winners of the week. Let's go ahead and get into it with our honorable mentions. Starting off with Austin Booker from Kansas. I know the way we did it, we each sent each other kind of a list, and this is kind of a culmination of guys that made one of our lists, but maybe not all. This was a guy that Ian had. So, Ian, what did you see from Austin Booker this week, particularly that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're an NFL evaluator and you're really leaning toward upside, this guy would tantalize you with the way that he played this week. I think, 6'4" and a half, 240, a little bit leaner, right? And that shows up, but 34-inch arms. And he won with power. He won with finesse, burst, bend, really any way possible, right? There was one really nice rep. I think it was on day 2, where he hit his guy with a long arm initially, and then he dipped under it, right? Somehow evading contact after, exerting power. So, those kinds of feats of athleticism, you don't see that often. So when it shows up in a one-on-one setting, you really take notice. I think he's going to rise very far after this showing. I think he's going to test very well. And he's one of those guys that I'm looking at. Like, I might have a day 2 on him at the end of the process, but wouldn't be surprised if someone takes a swing a lot earlier than people expect.
Yeah, he's a guy, like you said, the upside with him is so immense. He's really raw at the position. I still think he's got to work on some moves, but he did showcase some really nice upside. Peter, are there any players here? I know you've got a few of these guys that really stuck out to you that really impressed and you think moved up your board substantially.
Yeah, for me, for sure, it's Michael Hall. I think he was fantastic in one-on-ones. I was very surprised by the weigh-in as well. He came in at what? There was 275 or 280, something around there. He was a lot smaller than I thought, but he really looked explosive off the ball, and his pass rushing moves looked really good. And one thing that I noticed actually about the interior defensive line was I wasn't necessarily impressed with a lot of guys' pass rushing bag. It looked like a lot of just bull rushes and not really much more than that. But Michael Hall really stood out to me as someone that definitely rose his draft stock. He was someone that we knew had a lot of skill at Ohio State. Didn't necessarily look like he kind of put it all together on game tape. But, I mean, from what we saw this weekend, he really looked good.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar to what you said. I was impressed with Nealand. I mean, from Western Michigan, kind of gotten a little bit of buzz over the last few months, but I thought he looked explosive. He showed some good pass rush moves, had some consistently with beating. I believe he beat Guyton a few times, which not many people did this week. I was really impressed with Nealand. I mean, all of these guys, I know Sermon, especially day 3, had an interception on Joe Milton in the red zone drills, had a tipped ball as well. He looked really good. Christian Haynes was dynamic. I think a lot of these guys really, really boosted their stock. But we're going to finish this on a positive note. We're going to start a little bit on the negatives here. Talk about who I think we can all agree was who took the biggest hit this weekend.
Yeah,
and that was Penn State cornerback Kalen King, who coming into the week was one of my top 10 corners. And I don't know if he's going to make my top 20 by the end of it. He was that bad. I don't think he won a single rep all week. He just looked slow. His movements looked off balance. We'll start with Ian. What did you see from Kalen King this week?
Yeah, and I'll preface by this. I didn't get to see every single rep. I didn't have access to the virtual credentials, so largely just seeing the one-on-ones on live TV. But from what I saw, what was evident is that the lack of elite size-adjusted athleticism did hurt him at times. And that was something we saw at the college level too when he played against MHJ, right? He's a good corner, but when it comes down to it, he's only 5'11", 189. He might run high 4'4", low 5'5", right? So, you look at that element of it, right? That non-elite ceiling really hurt him at times. I think the recovery, aspect of that, the margin for error is slim at the NFL level if you're not an elite athlete at corner. And with Kalen King, I think we saw he's got enough leverage IQ. There was one play that I do remember, I think in team drills, where he hawked in front of a pass, showing that good route. No, it was a one-on-one rep, but he showed good route identification skills, right? The leverage awareness is definitely there. But in this particular showcase, you see one-on-one, you see athleticism matched up against athleticism. And I think that kind of put it under the microscope for him. So I think, off-man corner, zone corner with really good instincts, if you can put him in that kind of situation, still some appeal there on the day two level. But I think at the line and press man, right, that lack of elite explosiveness and athleticism and length can get him in trouble at times. I think we saw that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there was one play where, another guy who will come up later, Tez Walker, who didn't have the strongest week, they were allowing him to pick who he wanted to match up, and he picked Kalen King, which to me was pretty telling, and he burned him. So what did you see from Kalen King this week, Peter?
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. That was actually the rep that I was going to talk about. One rep that told me everything I needed to know was, one, Tez Walker is coming out and saying, I want Kalen King. He wants to win a rep. If you wanted to win a rep this week, you went up against Kalen King in one-on-ones. Slow, just the play recognition on the double move. It was one of the worst reps I've seen this week. He looked like a statue out there. He was standing still. His feet looked like they were in quicksand. Like Ian said before, the recovery speed just isn't there. Looking like a guy who, honestly, at the beginning of this draft cycle, I thought was going to be a very, very high corner on my board. And he's down there. He's down there on like the day. I was going to say round 3 category for me right now. Like Ian said, a little bit of upside round 2, maybe earlier day 2, but it's just the lack of explosiveness is really telling. And it really seems like his production last year was just based off of Joey Porter Jr. on the other side of the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you guys said, he has that day 2 appeal, but really rough week. Hopefully he can bounce back in a big way at his pro day and his combine. Moving on to the next guy who I think dropped a little bit, and we just talked about it. It was Tez Walker, and we even saw it a little bit in the game today. Just when it comes to physicality, I don't think Tez Walker is the most physical receiver. You kind of got to get him the ball in space, and he really wasn't winning those contested catch opportunities. I know there were at least 2 or 3 plays. I believe he had a couple of deep balls from Hartman that once he was kind of met at the catch point, he really didn't have a chance, and that was something that stood out. So going back to Ian, what did you see from Tez Walker this week?
Yeah, it's tough. This is a guy who had some round 1 hype. To me, he's been a fringe day 2, day 3 guy since I watched him earlier in the cycle. And I think what we saw this week was kind of a microcosm of, the weaknesses on tape. I think within a vertical wide receiver role, he's very good. I think the explosiveness, the deep speed, right, the long strider pace, we saw that on several one-on-one reps when he was able to get separation. But there's also an inconsistency with the hand technique, right? He's very instinctive working on the boundary, but there are times when his hands are too wide. Maybe he's not getting in position quick enough. And then also as a route runner too, right? Really, aside from that deep speed, not the most flexible guy at stems, not very natural at sinking, right? And that caused him to get crowded a lot too. And that only exacerbates the issues with the hands, right? So I think, especially on day 2, that was when he got in his head a little bit and the focus drops started to stack on top of each other. He rebounded a little bit on day 3, but then we saw during the game today, actually, kind of getting back into his head again. And the focus drops it's one of those things, right, where the initial cause of a drop can be more technical, but once it happens, right, it can be a snowball effect, right? So I think Tez Walker, we saw that this week. I still think in the vertical plane, there's a lot to like, right? I think, the explosiveness, the ball tracking ability, in those one-on-one situations in the deep third is very good, but I still come away with the same questions. Can he expand beyond that? And even within that role, can he be an elite player with those drops? So, there's questions for sure. I think there's enough to bank on upside wise. And I don't want to, just put a, tunnel vision on this week, because there were some really good reps in North Carolina where he is showing that ball tracking ability and he is showing strong hands against contact. So, the flashes are there on that tape, but this week, putting it under the microscope, still a lot to work on.
And you mentioned it there. I believe I only had, I think, 3 drops in the entire season at North Carolina. It was a pretty good number. He didn't have a high drop percentage, but drops were something that consistently showed up with Tez Walker this week, even in the game. Peter, we've been talking back and forth about Tez Walker. Never really a guy that, like Ian said, never really got the day one buzz, but I definitely thought he could be a top 50 guy. Is he still there for you, or is he falling kind of out of that top 50?
For me, he's always kind of been in that third round range, that early third round range anyway. But one thing that kind of really disappointed me was when, pardon me, at the beginning of the week with the measurables, this was a guy that was billed some sites as 6'3", 205 pounds. So seeing 6'1", 197 with that lack of physicality really kind of, disappointed me a little bit. And then, like you said, the focus drops, just another thing. But you mentioned he had a low drop rate, but he also didn't play the entire season this past year as well. But the upside is still there. We've seen the explosive playability. This is a guy that I'm still willing to take later on day two if he's there, just for the high upside value.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see what ends up happening with Tez Walker. Maybe the best looking player
I was
in
just
the
going to
entire
say,
draft.
handsome guy in college football.
Yeah, Sam Hartman. I don't think he had a very good week whatsoever. We're going to start with Peter on this one. Just really inaccurate, I felt like. What did you see from him?
Yeah, Sam Hartman was never someone that really, did it for me to begin with. So I had pretty low expectations going into the week, and he managed to kind of undercut those expectations. Just it seemed like a real lack of being able to process through his reads, even on 7-on-7s. It seemed like he struggled. So for me, I didn't really have high expectations for him coming into it, but still someone that kind of has that pedigree in college football. He seems like a Gardner Minshew, not just because of his hair and his facial hair in general. He seems like a Gardner Minshew type to me, where if he does get that chance, he could possibly, exceed expectations. But this is someone that just never really did it for me at the beginning.
And what did you see from him?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what we expected, right? And to me, it was the arm that really stood out. I mean, you got Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Michael Pratt. Michael Pratt's arm is decent, right? But still better than Hartman's. Spencer Rattler, right? Joe Milton has a cannon, even though other quarterbacking aspects aren't really there. Just juxtaposed with all of those guys, Hartman's below average arm really stood out. I mean, there were some intermediate drive throws that he threw into the dirt because he just couldn't push it far enough. And then on top of that, too, if you don't have high-end tools, you really need to be at a high level on the operational side to counteract that. And I don't think he's quite there, right? I think he's going to be a good QB3, a great locker room guy. He's got great poise in the pocket. But for me, I'd only take him late round if I have an extra pick, right? I'd probably try and bank on him getting in the PFA pool. For me, it's just those tools are really lacking, and that stood out this week.
Yeah, what I think stuck out the most with Sam Hartman, he just didn't, like you said, the arm, but he just couldn't put a lot of touch on his passes, and it just seemed like a lot of ducks were being thrown, balls just going into the ground. And when you say you've got all these other great quarterbacks that are kind of right alongside you, he definitely was the sore thumb in the group, and he definitely looked like the one that was out of place the most. Another guy who I felt looked out of place was LaDarius Henderson, really from day one. The measurements, 6'4", 309, pretty disappointing. Likely going to go to guard, played left tackle at Michigan, but a guy who I did not think had a very strong week. Ian, what did you think about LaDarius Henderson's week?
I think it was a little bit below. I think, stock slightly down. I would still consider him on day 3 because I think what we really saw this week is, all right, so here's a guy who played guard at Arizona State. Well, he played tackle his first year. Then he went to guard, and then he transferred to Michigan, and he played tackle again after getting inserted into the starting lineup. This week, I think, really confined him to guard. I think you saw the upside of guard in team drills, right? I mean, the measurement, 6'4", a little bit lighter than we expected at 309, but 35-inch arms, 85-inch wingspan. The dude's got insane reach, and he's really explosive, too. So I think when he was working at guard and team drills, being able to move guys, right, working in contingent with his tackle, that was a strong part of his week. I think, especially on running downs. I think he's a really good people mover. He's very physical. But in one-on-ones, that was where the limitations of tackle really kind of showed up. I think at 6'4", even though he's 6'4", that's not the tallest height for a tackle. Still pretty high cut, plays pretty tall with his pads. That can expose him to power. And then at the same time, not super flexible in his hips, right? So when he needs to recover, when he needs to acquire leverage, doesn't really work out there. So he can be prone to grabbing too. So, just a lot of limitations of tackle that I think were kind of put under the microscope this week. Still, I think at guard, there's a lot of upside. Day 3, I would easily take him as that guard who does have some tackle capabilities if you need him to as a backup, but I wouldn't want him playing notable reps there. I think this week kind of put that under the spotlight.
Yeah. Peter, what did you think?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Ian said, the first thing that stood out to me was the measurables, the hand size, arm length, wingspan. You know me, I don't look too much into those kind of things, but that's something that definitely popped off the screen at me. But just someone, like you said, confined to guard at this point, but someone that I'm willing to take as a swing little tackle upside, interior of the offensive line. You know, I didn't really expect too much from him. I kind of expected a little bit more after we saw the measurables, but like Ian said, it more confined to guard and someone that might have slight tackle upside at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with both you guys. This fifth loser spot, I went back and forth with a number of guys, and I kind of landed on Johnny Wilson, not because I think he had necessarily an awful week. I think there was a lot more positive to be taken away this week than there was negatives, but I think it really showed in the one-on-ones. This is a guy who probably should be a tight end at the NFL level. Really struggled to get separation at times. A lot of issues and his route running. Now as the week went on, I thought he did better, but early on in the week, his limitations really showed. What did you guys think of that one?
I'll take this one first. Yeah, Wilson is someone that, like you said, I think is just better suited at the tight end position. Couple of one-on-one reps that really stood out to me was against Andrew Phillips, who honestly stock up for that guy. I was very impressed from what I saw with him, but just a massive size advantage over Phillips and just couldn't gain separation at all. He was clamped up. So that told me really all I needed to know about him is maybe a boundary receiver, but he has some explosiveness for the tight end position. I just don't know. His hands too kind of scare me. This is someone that we've seen some people very, very high on, and I was just never that guy that was super high on him. I was thinking maybe round 3, and I'm still going to stick with that. But honestly, if we're talking about a Florida State tight end, I'd probably take Jaheim Bell over Johnny Wilson.
Yeah. Ian, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the idea of Johnny Wilson is still better than Johnny Wilson right now. And it's an upside pick. And there's a lot of upside there. I think the vertical speed, the size, right? But I think, it's a story as old as time with these guys who are 6'5", 6'6", right? You can't sink as efficiently, as consistently, and that can hurt you against NFL caliber defensive backs who have enough length to contest you physically, and then they're explosive, they're more fluid than you, so they're gonna win the positioning battle 9 times out of 10. To me, Johnny Wilson, when I watched his tape the first time, right, explosive, super physical too. I think that was one thing that maybe we didn't see enough of at the Senior Bowl because I forgot your name, mock draft guy. What's your first name? I want to address you. Peter, that's right. God. All right. Like Peter said, Andrew Phillips, right, was super physical on him, contesting coverage, right, really physical at the stem, really tenacious, and he had trouble dealing with that. So, I think we wanted to see more of that because he's going to need to use that to compensate for the mobility limitations that come with being just so tall, just having so much, surface area to manage as a receiver, as a separator, right? I don't think it's going to be a consistent thing for him at the next level. And then the hand technique too, like Peter said, right? There's some times where his hands are a little too wide, not always using diamond technique like he should, some late clap catches that can lead to drops, right? So I think just the inconsistency, was still there. The tools are very, very enticing, but I think you're going to have to scheme him touches because he's not that reliable separator. And to your point too, Jaheim Bell had some really nice routes where he was separating independently in the red zone using speed and bend. So I'm honestly just as intrigued by him after this week.
So before we kind of get on to some of the guys that boosted their stock, who are some other guys that, in your guys' opinion, kind of hurt their stock a little bit? Because we sent a list. So we'll start with Ian. Who are a couple of guys that you think hurt their stock that we didn't exactly talk about?
Yeah, I want to preface by saying this. I think the Senior Bowl in general is a positive experience. I think for anyone to get more exposure, right, is a good thing. And even if you have a rough week in practices, you can still interview with teams. You can still kind of build those relationships. So, I don't want to rag on guys too much because I think it is a good, positive experience in general. One guy I did want to see more from was Willie Drew, Virginia State, the corner, who's kind of coming because especially for FCS prospects, this is a really big opportunity for you, right, to kind of stamp your place on the draft class, right? And for him, 6 interceptions, 22 pass breakups this past year. And then I thought he really struggled. I thought athletically he looked like he belonged, but on the reps that I saw, one-on-one, and then the touchdown to Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint this past game today.
What a name.
Yeah, Rosemary. Just I know that's another one I gotta practice like 5 times in front of the mirror every morning. But I think Willie Drew. It's really uncanny. Athletically, he looked like he belonged, but for a guy who had so much production on the ball, I thought he really struggled getting his eyes back in time and kind of coordinating his extensions. So I think getting up to NFL speed with that is something that he still really, really visibly needs to work on. But I do like that he showed the physical traits to belong. I think that in and of itself is a positive for him. But just in this CB class, could get drowned out a bit, be a day 3 guy. I think he had an opportunity to build his stock up more than he did this week.
It's so funny. I texted Peter probably 2 hours ago, and I was like, man, Willie Drew's kind of disappointed me. He was biting on double moves a lot, and it just seemed like he lost that step, and then other faster receivers kind of got that leverage on him. Peter, who was a guy that we didn't exactly touch on that you felt hurt their stock a little bit?
Someone that for me, it was a bad week for Penn State corners. Johnny Dixon was someone that I thought just consistently, I feel like every single one-on-one rep I saw, he was getting ragdolled for the most part. And that was super disappointing. But a couple guys that I want to talk about more neutral, more than kind of disappointing, was the last 3 guys that I left on that list. And that was Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., and Xavier Leggett for me, because I didn't see anything that really made me think more of them. I also didn't see anything that made me think less of them too. With Bo Nix, it was kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type a couple days where he didn't really look that great the first day. Second day, he looked a lot better. Michael Penix Jr. didn't do anything that really stood out for me, but I already think high of him to begin with. And then same thing with Leggett too. Maybe the height was a little bit disappointing, but everything else, it's what you see with what you get with Xavier Leggett. So maybe the height, like I said, a little disappointing, but it's not really going to deter me that much from him as a prospect.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. One guy I want to touch on a little bit was Clemson defensive tackle Tyler Davis, especially on day 1. It just felt like he was playing out of control, off balance, couldn't really win any of those one-on-one reps. And I was a guy I thought pretty highly of. I think his stock took a little bit of a hit for me. But overall, I think, like we talked about, a lot more positive to take away from the week. So let's start to get into some of the guys that I think boosted their stock. And Quinyon Mitchell is a guy who was incredible this week. He might have been the best defensive player in Mobile for the entire week. Measured really well. He was quick, matching up really well with these receivers, and coming from a MAC school, maybe not the greatest competition in the world, he was shining against the Devontae Walkers and the Xavier Leggetts of the world. So, Ian, what did you like about Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the selling points that we knew coming in, right? He kind of just confirmed that, right? I mean, we knew that he was an elite producer at the catch point, right? And then he's smothering guys when they get a chance to, get near the football, right? Half the time he was kind of canceling those routes midway through. So, you like to see the physicality too. I think the recovery speed, right? There's rumors that he's going to run the 4.3s, and we saw that, right? Even if they try to get a step on him, that space is erased just like that, with the snap of a finger. And then I think the one thing that I really wanted to see from him this week, because at Toledo, a lot of off man, a lot of zone. And I think Quinyon said, part of the reason that he played is just because that was his call. That's what he's comfortable with. He likes playing with his eyes to the football, being able to plant and drive a little quicker and make plays on the ball. But they asked him to play press man. They asked him to play in the slot press man a couple times. And I really liked how he used his physicality to gather receivers early in reps and kind of dictate that positioning. There were a few reps in press where you can tell he's still kind of feeling out that spatial awareness, kind of opening the door a little bit too quickly. But that was few and far between. I think by and large really showed out however he was utilized and made plays and, just kind of erased his man. And then we remember talking about Tez Walker and him choosing Kalen King. I think that one-on-one rep to end the practice, he chose Roman Wilson. He sees this guy routing people up. He's like, give me this guy. Let me see if I can take him. And he could. So I think, that was a really fun thing to see, the competitive mentality and the nature of his, production too. So overall, a lot of good things to take away. I think the athleticism, the playmaking, the versatility too. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go top 20.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the press man comment. Just a guy who – that was one of my concerns. He wasn't necessarily the most physical corner. I thought he nailed it this entire week, was moving really well in press. I think the question that we should be asking, because I think he's, I don't want to say a lock, but I think there's a very good chance he goes inside the first round now. Is he the top corner in the class? What do you think about that, Peter?
For me, it's still tough. I go over really two people at this point now. That's Terrion Arnold and that's Quinyon Mitchell, but I think it's a toss-up between the two. I just think what Mitchell was able to show this week, like Ian said, the one concern I really had was how's he going to do in press man? And he was pretty fantastic, honestly, and that was exactly what I wanted to see. So, I think it's a toss-up. It depends on scheme for me, but I think in a cornerback class that you have a lot of really good players. You think Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry as well. Some of these guys at the top of the board. I think Mitchell is right there up there with those guys. I just think it's scheme and personal preference for the teams, depending on who they like. But he's right up there for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I thought he had an incredible week. Another guy who had an incredible week was Jackson Powers-Johnson. I think we knew coming in he was really high on a lot of people's boards. And he had high expectations, and he somehow exceeded those expectations. Yeah. I think he's probably the top interior player in the class. I don't know if there's much of a debate. Maybe Troy Fautanu you could put, but he was incredible. Peter, what did you see from Jackson Powers-Johnson? I know you just did your player profile on him today, but what did you think?
I just had to. I did an NFL draft diamond short on him a few weeks ago. I just had to expand the analysis because I was just so thoroughly impressed with how he was able to just dissipate bull rushes from the interior guys. And really the one thing that was the big win for JPJ for me was the size. I had no idea he had this type of mass. And the fact that he's able to play with the speed, power, and athleticism that he does at 6'3", 334 pounds, that's unbelievable. The one thing that I might just question a little bit, if he is more of a guard at the next level, his arm length is a little bit concerning, I'd say. Not too much. But actually, if you look at his arm length for the center position in the NFL, some of these guys like Jason Kelsey, Creed Humphrey, these guys have shorter arms. He actually has longer arms than they do. So it's super interesting. He would be like the second or third ranked in terms of arm length for NFL centers right now. So just a lot more to like from that position itself.
Ian, what did you think of JPJ?
Yeah, I mean, he dominated. I mean, those first 2 days, and then he didn't even play. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he may have left with a minor injury. Yeah, so that was kind of, that put a dampener on it. But, before he left, he was dominant, man. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I think, in one-on-ones versus defensive tackles at center and guard, I think the anchor strength is really impressive. 6'3", 330. I mean, the dude is a refrigerator. I mean, that's a lot of mass that he's packing in there, and he wears it pretty well, right? He's very well leveraged. I think the most impressive rep for me, though, was a rep against Michael Hall Jr. Michael Hall, very athletic, and he tried to get him, outside the B gap right there. And Jackson Powers-Johnson matched him with his lateral mobility perfectly. And then as he's staying in phase, is combating those hands, kind of maintaining positioning and synergy. I think that rep really stood out to me because here's a 21-year-old, third-year center who declared early. And, he's got the size. We know he has the athleticism, the tenacity. But that rep really showed me, against a really athletic guy who can put a ton of pressure on you laterally. He's still matching him with his athleticism, and he's staying in phase, composed with his technique and his hand placement. That, to me, was kind of what sold me, right? Like, we know he's got everything else, and then in the heat of the moment, he performs perfectly with that rep. So I think, dominant performance. He was PFN's Offensive Player of the Week for good reason. I think he's going to be a round one guy for sure. Just the question is how high, because there's a lot of teams kind of in that 18 to 24 range that could need a center at that point.
I wouldn't be shocked if he goes higher, whether it's Seattle, the Bears need a center. I mean, I don't know if he goes to the Bears at 9, but he was that good where I don't think people would be necessarily hate that pick if they made it. I thought he was fantastic and had an incredible week.
I actually had someone comment on the video itself. I mean, obviously it seemed like more of a troll comment, but he was like, listen, if I was Ryan Pace, I would trade and cut every offensive lineman just to get Jackson Powers-Johnson. I'm like, all right, that's a little much. But these Bears fans, I've noticed kind of gauging the fan bases that love him the most. It's the Bears, it's the Steelers, and it's the Jaguars who are just so gung-ho about Jackson Powers-Johnson.
Yeah, and I mean, for right reason. He was unbelievable this week. Ladd McConkey, day one, I was listening to the NFL Stock Exchange, was pantsing players. And then after that, I don't think he was still doing really, really well, but I don't think he had necessarily the same production he had in day one. But that day one was incredible. Ian, take it away.
Yeah, and I think part of it, too, on day 3 in particular, I know he was taking some reps and the ball just wasn't coming his way quite as often. So, I don't know if they were trying to give guys other opportunities, but I think all that he needed to do was kind of give that impression on day 1, like, hey, I'm a tier above everyone else. And I think he kind of showed that on day one anyway. I think, not measuring in super big, but no one expected that. I think what people expected to see was the route running skills and the route running ability, the separation ability. And that's what we saw, because with Ladd McConkey, you are getting a guy who is not only very athletic, not only very flexible, right? The speed, the throttle control, the angle awareness, right? To press into stems and kind of manipulate DB leverage and capitalize on that. That is all there. And he showed that on a number of his reps, right? Kind of pressing and then sinking and bending really acute angles and exploding into space and then converting into catch point. I think for me, you have a turbocharged athlete who's a great technician too. Those guys always go high, as long as they don't have, bricks for hands, which McConkey has very good hands too. I know there was one catch that he made diving, beyond his frame and managed to corral it before it hit the ground too. So he checked every single box, right? He showed, I'm a guy who can separate, I'm a guy who can catch, and I'm an NFL athlete. I think those were all the things that we needed to see to say, like, yeah, he'll probably go top 50, right? Nothing is set in stone, nothing is a lock, but, this is one of the more NFL translatable receivers that I think we've seen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Ian kind of nailed everything on the head. The only thing that I want to say that's different is I don't know if you've ever seen Ladd McConkey and myself in the same room, but we literally have quite possibly the same measurements all across the board. I actually think I have bigger hands than him, so that makes me feel a little bit better. But no, he's a tremendous athlete, and he's just the separation ability. When Georgia fans say on Twitter and everything that they're like, he's literally open every play, you don't really believe that, but then you see his just twitch and his athletic ability, and you're like, my God, this guy could possibly be open on every single play, especially in one-on-one situations. I mean, he was dusting dudes. It wasn't even fair at some point. I don't remember exactly who the player he matched up against, but it was in the slot, and he did like a double move to the inside. It was one of the more popular videos on Twitter that I saw, or one of the most popular clips, and he like you said, he absolutely pantsed that poor defensive back. And he's just someone that after the day one performance didn't really look like he needed to prove a whole lot more after that. We kind of saw what we needed to see, and then we're just going to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. He's probably going to end up on the Patriots somehow, but an incredible week. And
man, can I just say, like, we were watching the live TV, and they're like, yeah, he's the next Cooper Kupp. Yeah, he's the next, Hunter Renfrow. It's like, guys, can we there's the whole we don't need to limit ourselves to that sample size, right? Come on. It was just oh my God. Like, what's next? Jordy Nelson, right? Nah,
that's not a bad one. Tyler Guyton, another guy, day one, absolutely incredible. Measured really well. I think he's another guy who's worked his way into the first round if he wasn't already. Didn't really need to do too much after that day one performance. Was powerful, showed his athleticism, had a strong anchor. I don't think he got beat by anybody except maybe Darius Robinson on day one. He was incredible. What'd you get? Peter, what'd you think of him?
Yeah, Guyton was someone that we knew that the size, the athletic ability was clearly there. One thing that I kind of wanted to come into this week seeing from him was a little bit more refinement in the technical aspect, and I think we definitely saw that. He actually impressed me with his hand placement and his footwork and everything like that. I mean, the size, I thought he was like 6'5", so seeing the 6'7" around the 330 mark is really nice. He just seems like someone that's going to be just an uber athletic beast at the next level. And like you kind of said, after the day one performance, we really didn't need to see too much more after that. And he's definitely someone that I think has firmly worked his way into at least the back end of the first round consideration.
Yeah, without a doubt. Ian, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen time and time again, NFL teams will invest in guys that are super tools rich at tackle, and they'll take him earlier than you expect too. So I think he definitely kind of set that in motion this week. One impression that Guyton made on me when I was studying him, he was a defensive tackle in high school, and you go look up his highlights, and he's winning with swim moves and kind of rip moves and dip and rips too. So like really, really flexible player for his size, like uncanny. You don't expect it. And I think that kind of showed up in a big way this week. I think the hand precision, he had his good moments. He had his iffy moments where the precision can still be a little bit more refined. But I think the footwork in particular really impressed me in particular. And then the flexibility too, because I think flexibility is a really, really important foundational aspect for leverage acquisition and maintenance, right? Kind of aligning your base and playing with that controlled lean and not bending at the waist, right? And every pass set that he had was so clean. I mean, even if his hands didn't hit exactly where they needed to, just his feet, his base was always in the right place. He's aligning to kind of wall off that angle for rushers and then using his athleticism to kind of just erase those, just kind of, nullify the apex. And I think that was a really strong thing for me because, as an evaluator, I can look away from that and say, yeah, he's not an all-pro hand fighter right now, but his base is so steady. He's so flexible. The recovery athleticism is there. So even if he's raw in a few areas, I'm still looking at this like this is a guy that I'm going to bet on because the foundation, the athletic kind of fail safes are there for him to kind of build on that while he's refining his hands and still kind of recover at the end of the day. So, really strong performance from him. Not, even when he wasn't super refined, still show the traits to kind of counteract that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Guyton, I think another guy probably worked his way into serious first round consideration if he wasn't already. Another guy who is starting to get first round buzz. You knew it was coming. It's Darius Robinson.
I'm just going to let Ian take this one away.
I don't think any player won the week more than Darius Robinson. Go take away him.
Yeah, I mean, man, I had a ton of fun watching his tape toward the end of the year, right? This is a guy who I kind of knew he was a defensive tackle earlier in his career, right? You saw the length and the power, right? I think that straight line power was really appealing when I watched Isaiah McGuire last cycle, right? It's like, okay, I'll keep an eye on this guy. And then this season, he's playing the Isaiah McGuire role, 7 tech, wide 9, and he's doing well, right? So it's like, that catches your eye. You want to see more. And this week in particular, I think, we kind of saw it, right? Playing from interior alignments, out exterior alignments, winning in every possible way. The quick swim was really impressive for him. I think not just the length and the ability to kind of pry through, but then the flexibility to kind of reset his base after getting through and the explosiveness to enter pursuit. All of those things were there with him too. And then winning with straight line power as well. He was one of the few guys that managed to kind of drive Christian Haynes back in one-on-ones because Christian Haynes, the dude's a block of rock, and Darius Robinson's like, I'm just going to use my 35-inch arms, my 280-pound frame, and I'm just going to bowl through you, right? And he drove him back right into the QB. So that power profile is elite, but also the flexibility, the burst, the ability to kind of vary his rushing moves based on the situation and the alignment. And then in team drills too, he's splicing through gaps with his explosiveness and blowing up run plays. Really checked every box for me. And, one comp that I've been coming to a lot is the Nico Autry. Been very underrated for the past decade now with the Colts first, then the Titans, kind of that alignment versatile goblin, right? I think Darius Robinson at his peak could definitely be that kind of player. So, man, I was super excited to see because I think the upside here is so fun. So when you see him start to realize that, it's pretty gratifying for sure.
This is a guy that, me and Peter will send each other our position rankings forever. And Darius Robinson has been in there for me for quite some time. I'm like, I really like this Robinson guy. He was incredible this week. Like you said, playing inside, playing outside, can play him anywhere. I was powerful, was quick. He did everything he wanted. I mean, Peter, what more is there to say?
I wasn't even going to say another word after that. I saw the smile on Ian's face after he was done. That's all I needed to say.
Yeah, I mean, he was incredible. I guess my other question, is he a first-round guy now? Or do you still think so? You guys both think he goes in the first round?
I don't know if I'm not going to lock it in, right? Anything can happen on draft night. There's so many variables, but I'll say this. When I graded him, he was in first round range, right? Like I could have accepted him being considered there. And I think this week only reaffirmed it for me, right? And I think it's going to come down to schematic preference. Like you got to have a scheme. You got to have a vision for him, right? But I think if you do, it can be very rewarding. So, I've mocked him to the Eagles before. I think being that strong 5-tech who can kind of move around would be very fun. I think the 49ers would be a good fit with Chris Kocurek, defensive line coach. I think with him, this dude could be insane. But, there's a few particular fits that stand out, but I think it's going to have to be the right one to get him in there.
Yeah, I could see Detroit down the board as well as another team that could take a flyer. I think those teams towards the back end of the first round, I think could.
I was thinking the Ravens too. Yeah,
Ravens, Niners,
for sure.
Kansas City, I could even see. I mean, they've taken some guys in the past, but I think Darius Robinson really boosted his stock, and like we said, went from maybe a third round guy to potential first, which I think was the biggest riser of the week. Another guy, Roman Wilson. We knew how talented he was this past season at Michigan, was their number one receiver when a lot of people thought it was going to be Cornelius Johnson. He really came in, took that spot away, had incredible production for the national champions, and then went to the Senior Bowl and was incredible, similar to Ladd McConkey, just his separation ability all week long. He was one of the only guys that beat Quinyon Mitchell. Now, granted, Quinyon Mitchell did slip on the play, but he still won that rep. I thought Roman Wilson, his speed, his route running, his separation, he kind of checked all the boxes. Peter, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, Wilson just seems like the perfect slot archetype at the next level. I'm very curious to see what his speed will be, pro day, combine, all that kind of stuff. But he's just got the twitch and the route running ability that I feel like he's going to be a menace in the middle of the field. I mean, you saw it. You're able to see such a small sample size at Michigan because it's a heavy run first offense. But I mean, every route that he ran, he almost won for the most part. He's a sensational player overall. I was super excited to see what he was going to bring to the table. And kind of like Ladd McConkey, kind of like Tyler Guyton, after the first day, we knew exactly what we needed to know about Roman Wilson. Any questions that we kind of had were sort of answered. But yeah, his separation ability is something that I thought was really, really eye-opening. We knew that he was able to separate, but you always think, with a run first, heavy run first offense, you're thinking, oh, well, he's able to gain separation because the team is kind of, run committing. But I mean, in one-on-ones, he was thoroughly dominant for the most part. And I was super impressed with his week in total.
Ian, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what Peter said. I think, Roman Wilson, stylistically, it's fun because, there's some minor differences. Like Ladd McConkey is a little more surgical, a little more violent with his route running and kind of manipulating DB leverage. Roman Wilson is so smooth, man. I mean, that's one thing that stands out. He does have the twitch to offset guys that releases, and he's shown that. But when he's gaining separation on those crossers and those posts, he's bending and he is sustaining acceleration while he's kind of stressing angles for defensive backs. And then by the time they realign their base, he's got the speed to kind of gain separation after that too. So my comps, I usually like to be one-on-one organic with my comp comparisons, but for him, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. Diet Chris Olave stands out to me because Chris Olave, one thing that was very prevalent on Olave's college tape is that he is manipulating angles with his initial speed and then bending out of breaks and using that acceleration to just get a step on guys right away. I think Roman Wilson has that same kind of acceleration and that curvilinear acceleration capacity to kind of carve through guys like that. So smooth, so seamless. And it's really exciting to think about what you could do with him in slot, on motions too. I think, you're still kind of scratching the surface with him.
Yeah, without a doubt. I was another guy who boosted his stock there. Brendan Rice, it's kind of a catch-22 with Brendan Rice, I feel like, because when it comes to a physicality standpoint, Brendan Rice was more physical than just about anybody on the field all week long, especially at the catch point, was physical, really good contested catch guy. But I didn't feel like his separation package, his release package, really any of his separation abilities was super impressive.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of in the middle with Brendan Rice. I definitely think he boosted his stock because he had a good week, but I see Peter nodding. What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, I agree with you with the physicality standpoint, and I think he's over-reliant on the physicality because he's just, I mean, like you said, he was violent in some of those. I keep drawing a blank on some of these one-on-ones, but I believe it was the deep pass that he caught in the end zone. He just I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but I just remember seeing just eye-opening physicality that, you don't really get to see for the most part on game film itself unless you're just zeroing in on that one player. But I really love these one-on-ones for that opportunity to see it. And Rice was someone that was just so physical, but it almost looks like he's looking to be physical. Like he's not willing to win with any of his other traits except for just being physical. And I don't really know how sustainable that is at the next level, just being physical, because he obviously has other traits that he'll be able to win at the next level. But I think he just kind of has to, he looks like he plays a little out of control for me, especially with the physicality standpoint. I think he just needs to kind of rein that in a little bit. And, what a good wide receiver coach. I'm sure that they'll be able to maximize his ability. I think he's definitely a day 2 guy after this week. I think maybe 3rd round. I'm thinking he's got really nice size as well. So, someone that I think was a little out of control, but definitely raised his draft stock for sure.
And I know you really liked what Brendan Rice had to show. What did you like about him this week?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to, first off, route running is very important to me. And even more important, I think it's one of those things that my valuation of it has kind of progressed over the past few years. I've kind of valued it more. But I think with Brendan Rice, you're seeing a prospect who is kind of in progression. I think we saw positive progression in Mobile. I think that first day, he showed he could fight through physicality, but the routes looked really stiff, right? He's not really getting a ton of separation at stems. The hip transitions, there's a big delay after that, the hitches. I thought he improved that a little bit over the course of the week. I think we're looking at, I do like the energy that I'm seeing there. I do like the lateral mobility, the foot speed. I think that is all very good. I still think he can improve its sinking a little bit more. I want to see him improve that. But you go back to USC tape, and I think there are good flashes of sinking ability, quick stopping ability, the foot speed to, chop your feet at stems and separate and kind of retract back. And then I think there is some curvilinear acceleration on tape as well, kind of using the ankle flexion to sustain acceleration moving upfield. So, I do think we've seen it in spurts, and I think we saw it a little bit more at the end of the week than we did at the beginning of the week. So that was a good sign for me. And then the physicality, right? I think, not just the physicality, but the competitive mentality, the tenacity, right? Going up for the ball. I think it was against Cam Hart where he mossed him in the corner of the end zone, using his length and kind of that authoritative catch point technique, the strong hands to kind of come away with that football. So I think, you look at the physical tools, 6'2", 212, really good length, really good strength, and then the speed and explosiveness as well. He'll probably run in the 4.3s. So there's a lot of upside there. And for me, seeing the lateral energy and the hyperactive twitch, right? I think the sinking ability can still get more efficient there, can still work on that, but there is a good foundation to work with. And then on tape too, very good blocker, right? So I think right away, you're getting a rotational guy with really good utility, really good big play potential, and could develop into more. I think this week wasn't perfect for him by any stretch, but I think it kind of gave us a window into that potential. Like, hey, he could develop. There is something to work with here. So that for me was promising.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy that, there's a lot of receivers. Ricky Pearsall didn't even make an honorable mentions, but I thought he had an incredible week, and really boosted his stock. But yeah, I thought Brendan Rice did a really nice job this week and showed that physicality a little bit more, like you said. Still has some areas to improve, but I definitely think he can be in that day two conversation. Dwayne Carter, another guy who I thought was really good, particularly on day one. And honestly, the entire week for him was really good. Another guy who I could see sneaking into the third round after this week. Had a productive year at Duke, measured pretty well, was quick, powerful, and showed a lot of different areas where he can be a really good player. So we'll start with Ian this time. What did you like about Dwayne Carter's week?
Yeah, another thing with him too, I believe it was a 3-year captain. Don't quote me on that, but I think it was a multi-year captain. So, winning over teams in interviews too, right? I think, we know he's going to interview well. We know he's going to kind of resonate with that. So really everything that he needed to do was have a good week on the field. And he absolutely did that. He was, an interesting one. I feel like he went under the radar sometimes on the media lens, but, every day, man, one-on-ones, he's got that straight line power, right? 6'2", almost 310, 33-inch arms. That's a really good power profile. You're low to the ground, but you're dense. You've got good proportional length. And multiple times, he blew his blocker back. I believe LaDarius Henderson was one guy that he beat in one-on-ones, just kind of pile drived him to the turf, So, showing that raw power. And then in run defense and team drills, too, really good angle IQ, really good snap timing, really good quickness off the snap, using that burst and that power to kind of grate the line and create those creases where linebackers can make plays or make plays on his own. I think, the motor is there as well. So for me, athletically, there's a lot to work with, physically a lot to work with, the motor, the awareness, right? And then the ability to kind of win with your hands and technically channel your traits. Again, we use the cliche checking every box, but, especially for an interior lineman who can play on 3 downs to the next level, I think as a 3-tech, a 2-eye, 4-eye, he showed a lot to work with in Mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I agree with what Ian said. And, we back and forth have been texting for quite some time. We mentioned Dwayne Carter early in the season as well, early in the draft cycle as someone to watch. And the overwhelming explosiveness off the line of scrimmage into power is a transition that's just, he's fantastic. He really is. And I think he's going to be a real problem, a real disruptive force at the next level. Someone that's going to fly under the radar throughout the draft process. I feel like it's someone that's going to be a really nice, maybe, late day 2, early day 3 guy that's going to make an impact on every single snap.
Yeah, without a doubt. Another guy, Dominic Puni. Really, really good week from Puni. Obviously, he has the measurements to where he could play that tackle position, but they were swinging him into guard. They even ran him at center in some plays. And everywhere they put him, he was really good. I think he had one rep early against Gabe Hall where he was destroyed. And then after that, really sound week from him, showed some really good technical abilities, showed his athleticism, which is one of the big selling points of his game. Was really impressed with Puni. We'll start with Peter. What'd you like about Puni's week?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is I love the story. A 0-star recruit from Division II, making his way to the Senior Bowl. It's a fantastic story. He's a wonderful player, in my opinion. Like you said, he got destroyed by Gabe Hall early, but a lot of guys did get destroyed by Gabe Hall early. So I'm not really gonna, put too much on that one. But someone that we knew was going to come in with a lot of line versatility. I believe he made almost an equidistant amount of starts at tackle and guard in his career between left, right tackle, and then right guard as well. So he's going to come with a lot of line versatility as well. Like you said, and he excelled in a lot of places. His measurements are really nice. I love the size for guard at the next level. And then with maybe a tiny bit of tackle upside as well. He does have that power profile in him as well. And I just think that he's someone that has been a steady riser over the past, I'd say, what would you say? Probably over the past 6 weeks.
Month and a half, yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So I think this just kind of confirmed his day 2 status for me.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Matthew Bergeron from last year from Syracuse, just a guy who played some tackle, probably going to swing guard, very similar measurements as well. And what do you have to say about Dominic Puni?
Yeah, he really impressed me. I think that one rep against Gabe Hall, he jump setted him, right? Was in transition as he was making contact, and that's kind of what caused that. So I like that he learned from that and applied it through the rest of the week too. You saw him, his base was a lot steadier off the snap, always playing square with guys, not giving up an angle advantage, using his low center of gravity to stay grounded, right? And then the active hands to gather guys within his frame. He's a really wide dude, right? So we saw that too. So I think for me, the knee bend still isn't great. The hip flexibility still isn't great, right? So I could see that confining him to guard or center. But, even at center, right, he took reps there and he actually snapped the ball pretty well. I think, we saw a few low snaps this week from guys who actually had center experience, right? So I think for Puni, doing that, showing that, at kind of short notice, right? I think that was very good for him too, because you look at teams, they want IOL versatility. They want guys who can play at guard or center in a pinch. And I think Puni, he's got that 5-position versatility, but could be a legitimate impact starter at guard if you give him some time to work with it. So I think the tools are there, the refinement is there, the ability to apply what you've learned and kind of grow over time is there in a short window. And that's everything you want to know if you're an NFL coach.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about it. I think for the most part, it was a bad week for the centers. I thought Andrew Raym and Jax Powers-Johnson were probably the 2 best centers of the week, but he might end up being a center at the next level because he showed that upside. I didn't think Tanner Bortolini was particularly great. Kingsley Aguican was okay, showed some flashes, balance issues, but maybe he is a center. But like you guys said, that offensive line versatility makes him very enticing. I think he probably does slide into that day 2 range. Adisa Isaac, I know this is Peter's guy, so I'm not even going to say anything. Take it away.
That's Brooklyn, baby. That's Brooklyn Adisa Isaac right there. Big fan of him, been for so long. I mean, what I really love is the confirmation of the size, the versatile size, 6'4", 250. Could easily see him playing rush linebacker in a 3-4. Can even see him playing 4-3 defensive end. He's, the one knock that I had on him after day 1 was he looked very out of control. He looked so explosive off the snap that he just kind of, got under his own feet a little bit, but he cleaned it up over time. And he's just someone that I really like. He's a great run stuffer as well. So just someone that I think for me, I was always super high on him. I thought he was easily a day 2 guy, kind of confirmed my belief this week as well. Just gotta kind of clean up his energy a little bit. I feel like he plays with such a high energy, such a high motor, which is a good thing, but he's just got to kind of refine it in himself. But, I mean, I'm a little biased because of the Brooklyn thing, but he's a great player overall. And I think that he's going to be very good at the next level. Ian?
Yeah, I think, there's been a gap kind of between him and Chop Robinson for the entire cycle. And I love Chop, right? He's one of my favorite prospects at the edge position. So I don't think Isaac will surpass him, but I do think we're seeing that gap close a little bit. I think for me, Isaac, kind of what you said, right? When I was watching him coming into the week, trying to affiliate myself, this is a guy who has explosiveness. He's got good bend capacity. He's got really good shock in his hands, right? And that comes from being 250 pounds and having 34-inch arms, right? For me, putting it together as a pass rusher on a down-to-down basis, there's still some work to do there in the counter game, but really good pursuit speed and energy, motor as well, and the agility as well to kind of offset and kind of stress guys laterally is there too. So he won with that very early on. I think this week was kind of showing, that he can put that together, right? I think there was one really nice rep in team drills where he had a double swipe rip, using that bend and explosiveness and getting there in 2 seconds, right? So, very, very athletic. The high energy is going to win over coaches, and the tools, every tool that you need is there to work with in some capacity. So, I was thinking of him as a top 75 guy heading into the week. I think top 50 is definitely on the table, maybe even fringe first round, being one of those priority guys out of the top 32. I think he definitely made some moves for himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Peter would agree. I think the gap closed, but it's a lot closer now between him and Chop Robinson. And I mean, I don't think me or Peter, we're not the highest on Chop, but I think that there's an argument to be made there. But I think Adisa Isaac was really, really good this week. Gabe Hall, I mean, day one was probably the best player on the field outside of maybe Fuaga and JPJ. And then he kind of continued that production throughout the entire week. I thought he was fantastic. A guy who I had as a late day 3 guy, probably moved up into that earlier day 3 before this week, maybe around that round 5-4 sort of range. But his power, his bull rush was fantastic. We talked about Puni earlier and just ran him over. And he was just embarrassing guys left and right. I was thoroughly impressed with Gabe Hall. What did you think of him, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, shoot, the story of his evaluation for like 2 years now, right? Because he could have come out last year as well, was this guy who the tools are very evident, but it's just, putting it together, right? For a long time, it felt like talent over, technicality, not a ton of refinement there as a pass rusher. And you could see on the Baylor tape, like, that's a talented defensive line. They had Siaki Ika, right? And Gabe Hall was playing alongside him. And you could see Gabe Hall, he's got great get off. He's got great power. It's just, channeling that, right? Sometimes there's not a lot beyond that. And I think this week, more than anything, showed what he can be, right? I would still probably keep him in the day 3 range, like you said, because the tape is not nearly as consistent as we saw him on day 1, where he was just beating guys left and right. I think that one-on-one setting really helped put those tools into a box and say, like, hey, this is what you're working with. If you're a DL coach and you look at that, you're like, hey, I'll take it, right? Give me this guy in round 4. And I think that's going to elevate him on day 3. I think he's going to be a priority player if he makes it that far, because there's so much to work with. And we just kind of saw this week, the full extent of that palette of tools. And I think that was really valuable for him, showing evaluators that in person and showing that against such premier competition. Is it going to be the end-all be-all for his evaluation? No, because the tape still left so much wanting. But I do think it was a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I kind of saw that really popped off for me was the measurements itself. I mean, he's got some fantastic measurements. The wingspan, 84 inches. Like Ian said, he's kind of like a ball of clay, I feel like. And you just got to get the right defensive line coach to kind of just mold him into what you want him to be. But everything's there. The power profile is there. The absolute suddenness and shock in his hand strength and his hand power as well. So, I mean, this is a guy that I've been higher on as of late, right before the Senior Bowl. Not too much higher, like you said, and you nailed it on the head, dude. Like, day 3, late day 3. I was thinking like 6th round pick, but I think he's firmly cemented himself in that 4th round, maybe early round 5 as well.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. He was incredible this week. Kind of going through some of the DBs that I thought really impressed. Cam Hart, I thought a guy who I was never really the highest on. Felt a little bit stiff when I watched him last year, and I just didn't really see that. I thought his hip flexibility was really good this week. His size really stands out, matches up really well against some of these bigger guys, and he had some really, really good reps. Had the nice play where he kind of baited I believe it was Bo Nix was the quarterback and kind of baited him on a Tez Walker play where he picked him off. He was just everywhere, popping off all week long. I was really impressed with Cam Hart. Peter, what'd you think?
The best availability or the best – well, I completely messed that up just now, but the best ability is availability. And I think that was the biggest thing coming into the week with Cam Hart. We see the athletic profile. We see the physical profile, 6'2", 204, fantastic size for the cornerback position. Just someone that kind of needs to stay on the field a little bit more and get a little bit more consistent. But I love what he brings from the athletic and physical profile and very physical with receivers as well, which is something that I was super impressed with.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian?
Yeah, one thing that kind of stood out to me is whenever he had a bad rep, or not really a bad rep, but whenever he had a rep where he got beat on, right, he came back and had a great rep. I think rebounding and showing that sequentially was really good to see. There was the one rep where, I think he can still find the football a little better at times, but, like you said, the athleticism is there, the physicality is there, the ability to play with confidence is there, right? And today in the game, that was we saw in run support, right? Triggering immediately on a screen, coming downhill, making the tackle in open field. His run support is something that I think is underrated too, and he's got the tools to do that as well. So I think, showing all of that 3-down upside as a corner, and then, playing different positions as well, rebounding when he needed to, that's all that you can ask for as a player, kind of showing teams and coaches that you have that resilience and that versatility. And it was a good week for him because, as you mentioned, the tools are definitely there.
Yeah, absolutely. Another DB that I thought really impressed, or not a DB. Sorry, I have my slides out of orders. A running back.
Super versatile.
Dylan Laube was really, really good. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most, because coming in, we've seen the production. His numbers at New Hampshire are ridiculous. I believe he had like 600 receiving yards and 17 rushing touchdowns, and he was incredible production-wise. How is he going to face against good competition? And he answered that question. But I was concerned a little bit about his speed. And right off the bat, day one, was one of the fastest players on the field. I was really impressed with everything he did. Was hitting holes, was breaking tackles, doing everything that you want to see a running back do. What do you think of him, Peter?
Oh, I'm just smiling because the comp that I'm gonna give to Ian right here is this looks like the next Danny Woodhead at the next level.
I knew it was coming.
No, but I mean, yeah, he was the one thing that shocked me about him was when he took his helmet off, how old he looked. But other than that, I mean, he was someone that you said from day one. You kept texting me. You're like, Dylan Laube. You're like, he looks fantastic. I'm like, all right, dude, stop texting me. Like, every play that he made, but he was sensational. I think one thing that really stood out to me was the separation he was able to gain as a receiver. You don't see that, especially from the running back position and the hands as well. So that's something that, if he's someone that's going to be more of a third down back, I'm more than comfortable having him in my backfield on third down. This looks like a guy that could honestly be like a 65 catch a season type of running back.
He reminds me a little bit of like a smaller Austin Eckler, just the way he can catch the ball out of the back.
Yeah, Danny Woodhead.
Yeah, sure. What'd you think of him, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little scared when you let off the DB thing for him because, like, he can play running back, he can play slot receiver, he can play DB now. This guy, we got to stop this guy. He's getting all the
Shohei Ohtani of football.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, God, we got to stop this guy. He's too powerful. But Dylan Laube, man, I mean, I think just the route running was really impressive to me. I mean, that was kind of the top selling point. We all knew he had the volume coming in as a producer at the college level. And then, he's showing all of the good little things that you want to see from route runners, right? The spatial awareness, I think the tempo modulations really under control as a running back is really impressive. And then the late adjustments with his hands, the body control, all of that was really impressive. I think you're definitely looking at not just the guy who had the volume, but had the skill to kind of command that, right? And we saw that this week in real time. But then as a runner too, 5'9", 210, really low to the ground, really compact, physical guy who showed that he could finish with physicality, kind of load his base and press forward through contact. Pretty good vision, really good burst and speed too. I think you're looking at a guy who, at the baseline level can be that third down back, but I think he could be more. I think you're looking at a guy who could be a solid starter. Like I legit, like this is one of those guys that I'm circling. If he's still there on day 3, right, round 4, round 7, I'm definitely taking that, but I could see a team maybe taking him in that 100 range if they really, really like him. Because again, the modern NFL is built on passing versatility, right? being able to do whatever you need to be asked of on a given down, making pre-snap checks, whatever you need to do. I think Dylan Laube being that versatile Swiss Army knife definitely played into his favor. And for a guy from New Hampshire, right? I mean, getting exposure, proving you belong, the best thing you could ask for. And he definitely delivered on that.
We talked about New Hampshire. I think they have one of the coolest logos in
Yeah.
college.
Oh, yeah.
I think their logo is awesome. Nope, not a DB again. Spencer Rattler, who won the.
All right, now we're getting out of hand if Spencer Rattler's playing DB.
Who won the Senior Bowl MVP. I mean, I think he was the quarterback who boosted his stock up the most. So much so to where I saw a Patriots fan saying, let's take Marvin in the first and let's take Spencer at number 34. I haven't seen Rattler that high since like 2 years ago. I don't think I'd take him that high, but I thought he looked really good, answered a lot of the questions we had. And, I think it shows a lot. A guy who had some maturity concerns at Oklahoma definitely seems to have grown in really every area, both personally and as a football player since South Carolina. I thought he had a really good week. What'd you see from him, Ian?
Yeah, I think, character is always a tough thing to evaluate, right? From our perspectives, we're never going to see close to the whole picture. But from what I saw, it was really encouraging that he seemed to have really good command of the offense, but also just kind of leading those guys well. And then whenever you spoke to him one-on-one, talking about humility, right, and gaining humility over time. I like how introspective he seemed to be about his early career. And that's a positive for me. I think, teams got a more intimate look at that when they were able to interview with him, and they'll get to talk to him again at the NFL Combine, right? So, I think that was a big positive for him. But then on the field, too, I think he was one of the more consistent quarterbacks, not just operationally, but also using his arm talent to push the boundaries and hit those tight window throws, outside the numbers in the corner of the end zone, right? The velocity is so easy with him. The arm elasticity, the angle freedom is very fun. And then the short area agility to kind of extend plays in the pocket, move when it needs to. Just a lot of good things on tape. And then he won Senior Bowl MVP, which there's not really a correlation to Senior Bowl MVP and NFL success, but it's a good cherry on top. It's a good thing to say, like, hey, this was my week and I owned it. So I think for Spencer Rattler, right, you look at NFL teams, at a certain level, if you're comfortable with the mental framework that's there, the developmental potential, you are going to bank on the talent, right? And I think quarterback is such a valuable position. We look at the class this year: Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy is probably going to go early round one. I think he's so young and he's so talented. I think that's going to happen. Then you kind of got a gap. You kind of got a void, right? How do you sort these guys? Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Spencer Rattler. Rattler isn't quite there yet for me. I think the operational consistency was still a concern on tape in South Carolina. Offensive line play was bad, right? The receiving core had some injuries too. So I think there is that give and take too. But I'm just speaking devil's advocate. I think there are going to be teams who have Rattler in that group with Nix and Penix. And there may be teams that would prefer him to them. Right? I'm just speaking, the talent is there. And the growth is there too. So I think it's really going to come down to what you saw from him this week. That's going to be a big factor. I think he entered that conversation at the very least.
Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if you're looking for a prospect in this draft class that's persevered through adversity over his collegiate career, it's someone like Spencer Rattler. He's experienced the highs of the highs and kind of sort of like the lows of the lows. But over the past couple of years at South Carolina, especially at the end of last season, the 2022 season, we were really able to see what he could do. And he was spectacular at the end of the season last year, kind of carried it over sort of kind of into this year. But I agree with what Ian said. I mean, this is someone that I've seen a lot of places. I know you are going to be excited when I say this, but Mr. First Round Mock on Twitter says that, he's QB1 of the class. So, and that's a former Jet scout that we're talking about here, but there are people that do believe that he is that dude. And honestly, it's all there. Like you said, he just kind of had to put it together. It took him a lot longer than it would take some other prospects. But hey, man, I would, as a Jet fan, I mean, listen, as maybe a developmental backup to Aaron Rodgers, I'd take him in the fourth round.
I mean, he can't be worse than Zach Wilson, can he?
Yeah, exactly. I'll take anyone at this point.
Yeah, exactly. The last guy we're going to talk about is the DB, who I thought was 2 slides earlier. That's Carlton Johnson from Fresno State.
No, that was Dylan Laube.
Yeah, exactly.
The size, when I put the size numbers in, I was like, oh, man, 169, 30-inch arms, 8-inch hands. but his production on the field, especially in the one-on-ones, was really good, was quick to the football, was fluid in his hips. I thought he looked really good in press as well. He's probably going to be a slot at the next level. I just don't see this guy playing on the outside at 169 pounds, but a guy who wasn't really on many people's radars at all, kind of boosted his stock and probably in that day 3 range now.
Yeah, I think this is a guy who was kind of catching my eye. He was a late addition to the roster, I believe. And then, like you said, the measurements, you kind of see that. You're like, that's a little scary, especially after Emmanuel Forbes went round 1 and then kind of struggled his rookie year, right? You look at that. Is it translatable? That's the biggest thing. And I think this week, right, there's still going to be questions about that. I still don't think he's going to go super early. But I think on day 3, if you need a guy who was feisty, who was fluid, like you said, taking the fight to quarterbacks, but also showing the route identification skills to kind of jump passes too. This dude is smart. He's physical, tenacious, and he proved that he can swarm guys at the catch point too. He was like a gnat out there. I mean, really just kind of swatting. He's in your face. No matter how much you swat, you can't get him out of there. And I think Carlton Johnson really showed that this week. I think, kind of kicked things off with that interception of Rattler on day 1. That was really impressive. And then on day 3 and one-on-ones, just, constantly being in the grill of the other guy. It was really impressive to me. I think, with his weight, maybe you want to play him off man with a little bit of cushion so that he can't be dictated. But I do think that there's enough athleticism and fluidity there to compensate. And then he plays beyond his frame a little bit. I think we saw that, right? I still wanted to add more mass, but I was encouraged by the fact that when he was at the catch point, he's contesting guys. He's taking it to him and he's giving them everything he's got. And that was impressive for me. So whenever you see a guy from Fresno State, doesn't have much buzz, doesn't have great size, right? You want to see him play beyond that, kind of, respond to the adversity. And I think he definitely showed that. He definitely kind of, he was one guy that wasn't completely on my radar, right? And now he's on my radar, right? So I'm going to go back and look at the tape, but I was very impressed with what I saw.
Peter?
Yeah, the one thing that kind of spoke to me about Carlton Johnson was his kind of tenacity and his short memory too. If there's a bad rep, he's going back in there and he has the confidence to come back as a lesser known prospect too. That's one thing that always stands out to me. Those lesser known guys that get right back in there, they have a short memory, they have the confidence to get into the grill of the wide receiver again, is something that I really, really like. And like you said, he was, I mean, he's about the size of a gnat too. He's not a big guy, but we're also looking at someone that was super physical last draft cycle as well. Devin Witherspoon was someone that kind of had, 5'10", 5'11". He did weigh a lot more. So there is room to fill out his frame. And, like Ian said, someone that could probably play off man, give him a little bit of cushion. But he looks like a type of guy that I would love to add to my team, day 3, round 4, 5, 6, whatever it may be. But yeah, he definitely raised his draft stock for me this week. Just out of the overall, I'm a late addition. I'm not a well-known prospect. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to press these guys and maybe impress. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, those are all the guys. That's all the list we have. I'm sure you guys are going to be flooding the comment section with so many other guys. Jarvis Brownlee, great week. Jaquan Jackson, great week. So many really good weeks. And it just makes this draft cycle that much more exciting with that much more things that we can go off of tape and new guys that we can kind of get to look into, like a Carlton Johnson and Jarvis Brownlee. But I want to thank both of you guys for coming on today. This was a blast, and hopefully we can set something else up in the near future, do something else. But that's going to do it for us in this one. Leave a like, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.